Okay, go right ahead.
Great. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be joining all of you. I've been asked to share some ideas with regard to competition pressure and how to deal with it. Beam is definitely the most frustrating apparatus from that point of view with regard to you train something in the gym, you feel well prepared with the athlete, and then the competition comes and it becomes something else entirely. So that is frustrating. Beam is the one apparatus where clearly there's no place to hide. On bars, you can be a little bit there, and pirouette quickly and have a fantastic cover and finish the routine. And generally on beam, if you're a little bit there, you're standing on the floor. So failure is ever present, and that's something we want to start avoiding from the youngest ages. So today I'm just going to share with you a few things that I've been doing throughout my career in Canada, and most recently as a freelance coach working with the German national team. And you're going to be surprised probably at how simple some of the concepts are and how ridiculously simple some of them are. But all of them have had a real impact with regard to stability under pressure, and a positive impact on stability and on the results. So normally I give this presentation after I've gone through the technique of every single skill. So we're just assuming now that you and your athlete have a complete understanding of how to technically do every skill, and as we start to prepare for competition. So it is simple, but for me, my entire beam system, especially working as a freelance coach, because you're only as good as your last visit or your last result, is that simplicity truly is the ultimate in effectiveness. I make it so simple that the athlete can understand it, and when she uses it, she gets an immediate effect from it, and then that builds the confidence and it is effective. So it's simple. None of this is going to be at all complicated. There's a fantastic book that explains a little bit about the attitude. It's called Grit, The Power of Passion and Perseverance by Angela Duckworth. And what it depends on is not just talent. What the athlete can accomplish depends more on passion and perseverance. And for me, that's great news, because you might have the one or two super talented kids, but most kids in most gyms are not that Simone Biles. So for me, wonderful news. Passion and perseverance is something that we can really develop. And it goes on to talk about how highly accomplished people have this ferocious determination, making them incredibly resilient and hardworking, which is exactly what we need in gymnastics. They have this in a very deep way. They know what they wanted to achieve, and they know where they wanted to go. And that's something that you and myself, I work on with the athletes, and I'm sure you work on that with your athlete. And that's that bond where it's actually a partnership as they develop through the sport. So passion and perseverance, I talk a lot about grit. I want the kids to be tough. I want them to be hardworking. And passion and perseverance, that basically sums up my coaching style. We talk about being positively aggressive with the girls. So it's been researched a lot. Another book is by Dan Quayle, The Talent Code. And what he did was he researched all these hot spots in the world that have not just once or twice, but they're known for producing ongoing excellence, talent in these areas. So if you think of Brazil, it's football. A lot of fantastic female tennis players come out of Moscow. Of course, in New York City, Juilliard School of Music. And through researching all of these groups, one key factor was knowing how to practice well, and he terms this deep practice. This applies perfectly to gymnastics. Deep practice has three components. One is practicing small chunks of the bigger action, and this is perfect for gymnastics. So specifically for beam, I actually teach the landing first, so we do loads of landing drills, how she starts the element, what to do in the middle of the element, and the landing. So we literally have a drill for everything, and she's practicing the bigger action in the small chunks. So she's really mastering every component of the skill before really doing the whole skill. The other thing he talks about is repetition. Well, I don't know of a sport that has more repetition than ours. We repeat, repeat, repeat. We train more than we compete. So this is perfect for gymnastics as well. So the way you repeat it, can you do it faster? Can you do it slower? Can you do it when you're offline and still continue and still stick it? So we want the athlete not only to be able to do it perfectly, but to be able to do it within a range of within here and here, I can still successfully complete the maneuver. So that works really well for gymnastics. Being mindful of when it goes well and celebrate. This is something that I've always done, and even more so in the last 10 years or so. Very often when something goes right and the athlete sticks it, it's like, okay, great, move on. Okay, with regard to we have a program to get through, that's fine, you've done it, now let's move on. What we want to try to do on a daily basis is to be mindful of what made it go right, especially when it's had a wobble or a fall, and then all of a sudden she's now doing this element successfully. So we'll stop. That was brilliant. Good for you. You've stayed on. Now, why was it so good this time? And I want her to be able to verbalize that. And we celebrate the fact that, hey, that was good. And again, that's always just building up that confidence rather than just bypassing it. Take a moment. That moment has an impact on her. Through the deliberate practice, you'll get this deep practicing, you'll get this conscious confidence. This is a smart athlete that knows what she's doing. And I've often seen coaches ask an athlete, well, why did you fall off? Well, I don't know, or why did it go well? I don't know. It was lucky. So a smart gymnast that's gone through every step of the process with a well-educated coach working together, you get this conscious competence, which is just a really smart athlete. So then what happens? You go to the competition and everyone says, well, I was nervous, or she was nervous, and the competition nerves kicks in, and suddenly it looks completely different than what you've been training so successfully at home. For years, we tried to, back in the day, we tried to talk the kids out of being nervous. So we bring in the sports psychologist and we try to do the calming and do all of that. And finally, it sort of dawned on us that nervous is normal. The Olympic champion is nervous. It's what you do with it. So it helps a lot for the kids to know, for the athletes to know, that it's okay to be nervous, and that's normal, and there's nothing wrong with you. It's a matter of what you're going to do with it. And that's my job as a coach, to develop this mental resilience. And I'm nurturing confidence on a daily basis. So I don't just check the routines at the end of the day. It's literally ongoing. Every word out of my mouth is trying to manipulate them in some way to take that next step in confidence, to take that next step in competence. So Dennis Edwards from Britain, with the Performance Impact, talks about competition, the 3 Ds. When you go to competition, nothing goes according to plan. I've never been to a competition where it was exactly in practice and then we get there and everything is perfect, from the bus schedule to the competition schedule to the judging to the whatever. There's always something that doesn't go according to plan. And so I see it as my job as a coach to prepare the athlete for that. Not just, can you do the aerial layout? Can you do the round off double back dismount? Can you stick it? It's the whole package of what happens the day or the week of the competition, especially if you're traveling, with regard to distraction, disruption, and differences. So when we take a look at that, there are 3 things for every female gymnast that is completely different the day of the competition compared to how she trains. Okay? The leotard, the hair, and the tights. Now, there are no gymnasts that train exactly according to those 3 parameters of competition day. Everyone trains in a more casual format compared to competition. But that's one thing that feels really, really different. So the long sleeve leotard probably only comes out on competition day. So, a few days before the competition, it's great if you get into a long sleeve leotard, if you can, so you can feel that. But hair for me is mandatory. It's every single day. So if you think of the National Ballet School, it's up in a bun, it's out of the way, you've got the long neck, you've got the fantastic posture. So it's an attitude. It's hard to feel schleppy if your hair is up nicely. If the girls have their hair in a ponytail and it's long enough to go in their eyes, that's not up for me. So it's got to be out of their eyes, because a big part of the technical component I do with the girls is with regard to seeing the beam during every element throughout the entire element. Well, if there's hair flipping in your face in the middle of an element, that takes away from the technical competence. So, but it's also an attitude. If the hair is up and it's out of their face, there's an attitude that goes along with that. Tights are really interesting. Shorts, tights, whatever you want to call them. Sorry, that's a picture of a group that comes to a summer camp I do in Portugal, and they got into this bun-up game on. So last year at the training camp, I made every kid put her hair up so we could train beam, and so they came back the following year with this T-shirt, and they said, it really does make a difference to how I feel. So that's just kind of a cute sidebar. But tights or shorts are something every gymnast wants to wear, and I understand that. I actually got this from Andrei Rodnyanko years ago when he was our national coach for Canada. And one of the first things he had the girls do is when they came to beam, he said, tights off. And we all looked at him like, what? And the girls were shocked. And as a coach, I was shocked. What are we doing this for? He said, CA, how do they feel when they take their tights off? I said, really, really uncomfortable. He said, exactly. We have enough problems on beam without them worrying about that the day of the competition. It's like, oh, good point. Okay, good. So from that day, every athlete I've ever trained on beam, their shorts are off. Before beam, they're on. If I'm doing flexibility, like Kim Yanis is doing here, or if they're on bars or tumbling or doing the floor routine, fine. No problem with the tights. But beam is such a psychological apparatus anyway that we want to eliminate any distraction, any feeling of uncomfortable. So it becomes part of the natural process of doing beam is they take their tights off. It really does make a difference. It'll take you a while to talk them into that one though. All right, so for me, there's one clear priority about beam, and it's all about stability. I will sacrifice anything to achieve stability. And sometimes with little ones, if they don't have the full requirements, we'll take one part out. We explain to the girl and the parent, she's not going to have the full score that we're hoping for because of stability. She needs to do this at this point. Once that element is stable, it goes back into the routine and we continue on. So I will make really tough decisions based on stability, because once the kid stays on, she immediately gets the feeling and the effect of, hey, I'm pretty good at this. And we really build that thought up. Along with stability is the attitude to fight. I will reward and verbally make a big deal out of any time an athlete fights to stay on. It might not be pretty, and it might be like, whoa, and having to fight and wave all over the place. But the first thing I'll say is, good for you. It would have been way easier to jump off. Good for you to fight to stay on. You are a competitor. And that's the kind of thing that I'm constantly trying to reinforce with the athletes, that attitude is going to bring success. That attitude is going to make you feel good. So we talk a lot about fight on balance beam. And when do I start it? At their littlest, tiniest ages. Congratulations to all Canadians that have in the day it was called pre-novice. I think now you call it Aspire. But that was something Andrei Rodnyanko did with us, and we put the beam down low. We have the kids at the youngest age group not competing at this height necessarily, and they're welcome to compete at 110. And it's amazing how much faster they learn. Skill acquisition is incredibly fast on a lower beam. And also how their confidence develops. And then we put it up slowly over the summer before they become high performance novice. So when we start, it's all about the attitude. We want to develop that attitude and not just wait to the day of the competition or when we're in competition season, but it's on a daily basis, literally every word out of my mouth. I'm trying to manipulate their attitude. You not brainwashing. I'm really trying to manipulate what it is that they're thinking, what it is that they're feeling. I want them to own it. So I won't just verbally correct the skill. I'll always comment on their attitude with regard to, I love the way you approached that fast kick. That was beautiful. That makes you look gorgeous. You know, whatever it is, technical, artistry, I want them to feel what they're doing, and I'm trying to give them corrections that make them feel good about what they're doing. It's just not technical. I really want them to feel like they own it. I'm always trying to set her up for success. So with regard to that, the right content is essential. And I know it's difficult when you have a group of athletes. Okay, we're all going to learn the aerial. We're all going to do the free walkover, whatever it is. I have to be really careful with that. I have to make sure that the skill or the series or the connection is the right one for the girl. It's really easy to say, well, she could do this and it could get a connection and she could get the bonus. The more often they fail at something, the more the impact is, I'm not good at this. And that's where the level of competence comes in. We don't want to wait till she wins the competition or she stays on beam. Right down to the drills. I've seen some really intricate, difficult drills, and they may have a benefit. What I'll do with those drills is I'll put them on the line or I'll put them on a low beam until there's a level of competence with them, because I want her to feel stable on the beam all the time. So if I'm giving her really intricate things that don't immediately give me a result, and it's just making her frustrated that she can't do it, then she's losing that thought of, I'm good at this, I'm competent, I am good on beam, I'm a beam worker. And so I'm always adjusting the program to make sure that we're ending up with that feeling, especially at the end of the session before they go on to another piece or before they go home. So with regard to skill selection, even the drills that we do, and we're trying to make sure that they have an understanding for exactly what they're doing. When it doesn't work, I don't want her to, oh, it's bad luck. I'm just not good at it. No. Today you're tired. Okay. If we've had the discussion, she was up late, she has an exam. Clearly you're tired today. So let's put that aside. You can't do it because you're not good at it. You're simply tired. You're not bionic. So when we work concepts that they can, oh, it's not me, I'm just tired. Once I'm rested, I'll be able to get right back onto it. This is really, really important that she understands she has control over what she does. It's not, oh, I stayed on, it was good luck. Oh, I fell off, it was a bad day. There's no such thing as a bad day. So that's that whole own it concept. I often talk about Tabia and Paulina because it's a really nice story. It's a neat story in that both of them were very afraid of beam. So you don't have to have the beam queen from the age of 8. Paulina did not learn a flick layout until she was 15, and she was quite shocked that I was insisting that she learn the element. It comes down to, if we can get the kids to believe in what they're doing and understand what they're doing, those concepts come together and it just builds and builds and builds. So are any of them wonder children? No. Are they super talented? Are they Simone Biles? Absolutely not. Were they the best gymnasts on beam at that world championship? No. But they had the attitude to fight and to get through the program feeling really good about what they were doing, and they felt competent before they even began. And that's a really important fact. And as proud as we are of their success, the coolest point for Ulla, and that was Ulla in that picture, by the way, she's the German head national coach. Ellie Zeitz is known for bars. She's a world bar medalist and an Olympic finalist. And when she was interviewed at this World Championships, she was asked, what are you excited about? And the media is assuming she's going to talk about bars and I want to make the final. And she said, I think beam is the most exciting event for us to compete as a team, because everyone always says, oh, the Germans can't do beam, but we can, and we want to show everyone that. Ulla and I looked at each other. It was like, job done. Absolutely. Ellie Zeitz didn't start this program until into her 20s, and she's always hated beams. Now, is she a beam queen? No, but she feels competent and I put her up first, and she leads the team every time on beam. So it is amazing what you can do when you sort of manipulate the attitude. It's very important for me to separate the self-worth from the outcome of the performance. Yeah, do you wish we had a better day? 100% wish we'd had a better day. But it's easy to make them feel bad about failure. Falling off the beam is amazingly visual. You can see from 500 yards away on the other side of the arena that you failed because you fell. So no one needs to tell an athlete that it was a poor performance. They feel that deeply. So I want to separate. You are a hardworking, amazing young woman. We need to rework a few things, but the content is right. How did you feel? Let's work it out. But it's never personal. And I think that's really, really important if you're trying to get the athlete to feel competent. Positive self-talk is something we work a lot on. You'd be shocked if you heard the inner thoughts of some of the athletes. They beat themselves up like there's no tomorrow. And so that's something that we get on top of right away. And I will interfere with their thoughts. If I see facial expression or body language that I think is not conducive to being able to progress on. But my body language, my facial expressions and comments are really important as well. So we have to be careful with that. A lot of us, Kana included, when we had Andre as our head national coach, he does not like beam, and he did not like to watch beam, and he would conveniently find something to do, anything else to do, but watch the girl compete on beam. So we all knew it, and the girls knew it, and it did have a bit of an effect. So it's important that as coaches, we coach ourselves with regard to our body language, facial expressions, and our comments, because all of them definitely have an impact. So what I like to do is make every competition a learning opportunity for the next one. It's a valuable resource you cannot get from training. No training feels like competition. So I take the moment right there and then to talk it through and to learn about it. Focus on performance, not results. Too many times you'll be disappointed that the score doesn't go according to your thought process. And we can't base our lives on a score. So yes, we want to qualify, or we want to win, or we want to attain something. But the bottom line is I set a goal for each athlete on every competition day with regard to that routine that has nothing to do with the ranking or the score, because I can't depend on it. It's an outside factor I don't have control over, but we do have control over what she does on the beam. And so we will set performance goals with regard to, we want all the connections done. We want stuck dismount. We want to make sure that on the aerial layout, we get all three elements. You don't stop after two because it didn't feel quite right. You have that technical competence to be able to, you see that second foot, you're fine to add the next layout. So we want control throughout the whole routine. So I'll set some very definite goals that have nothing to do. If you've been watching Netflix, the Michael Jordan Last Dance, it's really intriguing. And he says himself, he's failed over and over again, and that's why he has succeeded. So it's really that failure, and in this case, falling off beam. It's a great opportunity to gain experience and learn and develop resilience if it's handled properly. And again, that's where we really work that concept of positive self-worth and get something out of the competition, not just you fell, you didn't qualify, you didn't achieve the goal. The E comes before D. As a young coach, I was always tempted, and often did, put in everything that they could do. I would, she might wobble, or it's not quite ready, but it's safe. And, if she hit it or if she connects it, the E score. And it's very easy to become super excited on paper, and you work out the whole routine on paper with every connection bonus and series bonus, and you go, bam, this is going to be brilliant. Yes, but the reality is, if she's got something in there that doesn't have stability, beam is an apparatus that absolutely judges itself. You almost don't need a panel. the wobbles and the falls generally puts the athletes in the right order. Very rarely, unless it's at the highest level, does the the D score determine the final score. The D score, how much amazing difficulty she had, rarely will put her ahead of a really clean and classy routine, unless their D is so phenomenally low. But if it's a matter of taking out a 0.1 or a 0.2 connection versus absolute stability, the athlete is always going to be further ahead with it with a great E score. And this takes a lot of time for coaches to really understand. For example, they'll do a series, and if they don't connect it, they'll say, oh, quickly add seesaw wolf jump, W jump, wolf jump, whatever you may call it. And it's one of the highest deducted elements, the wolf jump, because if your leg is at horizontal, it's 0.1. If it's a millimeter below horizontal, which is where most gymnasts do it, it's minus 0.3. So you're throwing stuff in to cover all your bases, but in reality, you're losing more. So we really focus on the E score, not the D score. And it's important to be realistic. So although I love to be creative, and we had good fun back in the day with Luisa Portocarrero and Leah Homa and Elise Hoffner-Hibbs, and they have skills in the code of points named after them, as excited as we were, we didn't put them in until they were really ready. So my job as a coach is to get every gymnast to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And that's the essence of competition. Competition is a little bit uncomfortable, especially on beam. So what is it that I do? Well, we've already talked about the hair and the tights. On a daily basis, they're not comfortable with the tights off, but after a week or two, it's second nature to them, because I want them to be comfortable the day of the competition. I'd rather them learn through being uncomfortable during a training scenario. When we warm up on the line, it's easy to go to the floor area, which is usually sprung. And you've got great lines on the floor area, and that's usually where most athletes in the gym will run to warm up their aerial or whatever they're going to do, and then bring it back to the beam. Warm up their punch front salto, bring it back to the beam. This has no relationship to beam whatsoever, because the beam feels like concrete compared to the floor exercise spring. Now, if they're little itty bitty girls and they're doing cartwheels and walkovers, there's no advantage on the spring, so that's fine. But even once they start back handsprings, okay, if they're doing flick layout, if they're doing aerials, it has a definite impact on their takeoff ability, which they will not be able to depend on beam. So I have the girls warm up on a hard line, and by that I mean just the foam that's usually on your concrete floor for your vault runway. It's padded enough that they're going to be safe, but it has no advantage with regard to additional spring on takeoff. So we really want to make sure that the athletes are developing their own technique to make it successful on the beam, not depending on the spring of the floor. To the point that line work for me is absolutely essential. I depend on it. When I go to the competition, I'll take a piece of white tape and I'll put it down on the concrete so they can do their active mental rehearsal on a white line. Those Gym Nova pads that look like a beam on the top and they've got the red sides, those are phenomenal. I take those to the competition for the floor on the concrete, and I'll put it down on the floor so they have a visual reference with regard to the beam. But a hard line makes a big difference for skills that have any spring takeoff component to them, and they'll be better prepared to be on the beam. Be smart about the order of the elements in a series. Anything that travels versus anything that's stationary. So a very simple sequence of a wolf jump doesn't travel at all, a split jump doesn't travel at all, but a seesaw does travel forward a little bit. So it's much easier to put the stationary element first. So when you land, you're in a position of confidence. You can control that fairly easily, and then travel out of it. So I will go stationary travel versus travel, and then all of a sudden I have to be in the right position to be able to do this stationary element. So put the elements in the right order throughout their series, but more importantly, or just as importantly, be really wise about the placement on the beam. So if I have a spin, a pirouette, a single, a double, a triple, they need to see enough of the beam. So I will never put it beyond halfway. So she'll stand at one end, so she has loads of beam, or if she's very good at the spin, maybe about halfway, so she'll have enough of the beam to see. So again, the visual component for me is essential, and it really matters where you put the elements on the beam. In the routine, I will talk with the athlete. Where do you feel best about putting this big new element? Is it at the beginning? Is it after a while that you've been on? Should you put it at the end? I will listen to her opinion. The older she is, the more experience she has, the more I will value her opinion. The little one might say, oh, leave it to the end. I'll feel really good at the end. But as an experienced coach, you know that it's not going to be as successful at the end as the energy starts to wear out. So we want to place the element in the routine where she'll have the greatest capacity for success, the greatest capability. So for example, Elise's aerial layout. What we did was she needed to get on the beam and feel stable. So I put one guaranteed 100% morning, noon, or night, she can nail this skill. So I would put one element or piece of dance choreography that was intricate that she could hit every single time. So she has that sense of, I've got it, I own it, I'm on it, and then she would do the big skill. Leaving it much later in the routine, it's always on the mind a little bit. The problem with that is if the dismount is the big thing in the routine, that's a problem because it's on her mind the entire routine and just getting to the dismount. So in a case like that, before the dismount, I will put some really calming or really aggressive, whichever mood more suits what she needs to be in. I'll put that type of choreography right before the dismount so she has a time to refocus and get ready for that big element. Work in both directions on the beam and on different beams, of course, every coach knows that. But what I combine with that is, let's say you have two beams. So you have two beams side by side. I'll put 4 athletes on the beam. 2 will be at the end, 2 will be in the middle. All of them are facing the same direction. So as they stand on the beam, after body ready, arms ready, they're presenting. They all do whatever the skill is, a cartwheel, a walkover, an aerial, whatever the element is, as long as they're all training the same element. So they'll all throw the aerial, boom. And then body ready, arms ready, they'll all throw the element back. So you can have 4 kids going at once on beam. Not only is it efficient, so nobody's waiting for a turn, no one has to line up, but it's fantastic to get the kids to try harder to use the right technique because they don't want to be the one that falls. The whole group has to wait for them while they climb back on the beam and they do it again. So, of course, we're assuming that we've taught them the exact right technique that they know, they trust, and they can depend on, rely on for success. That makes a training session really efficient. And I love the added bonus it has to get them to be a little bit tougher under pressure. Every line feels like a competition because they don't want to be the one that makes the group stop. Once they learn the elements, I really want to try and get to that whole routine mode as fast as possible. So we'll always dance into the element, dance out of the element. That way they're not hesitating, they're not pausing, and it actually feels a little bit like the competition. So rather than just standing and looking around, okay, now I'm going to take a turn, and then I present, then I go, and then I stick, and then I walk back, and I wait for a minute. They're literally doing whatever the dance is. They dance in, they do the element, they stick, and they immediately dance out. So it's exactly the flow that they're doing from the routine. We compete every single day in a variety of ways. So if I've got a little group of babies and they're just doing their cartwheels, fantastic. Every once in a while, never at the same time, might be at the beginning, might be in the middle, might be at the end. Okay, everybody stop, competition time. And we make competition time a really positive thing. And then everyone has to stop and say, Susie, do your cartwheel, Mary, do your cartwheel. And we will literally take 2 minutes and watch every girl perform that element. With your older athletes, it's the aerial layout, whatever it is. So in that format, they're getting used to being on show, perform on demand anytime. They never know when it's coming, and we make a big fuss about it. So if the team hosts, they're little ones, and it's a whole team, you guys are brilliant. What a team! You're beam queens, and you're just constantly reinforcing that. Now, what do you do if it's a mistake and one of them falls? Hey, no worries. Come on over here. Do you realize what you did? We'll do a drill. We'll get her back around the line, put her up on the beam. Boom, there you go. You've done it. And then we'll make a big fuss. So that competition every day, we don't wait until it's time to compete. And it can be on anything, on a spin, on jumps, on their most advanced acro series, or a cartwheel. The dance routine is something I do a lot more of these days of Art Street with regard to useful technical drills. So I will do the dance routine, and then when it's time for the flick layout, rather than dance and then stop, turn around, walk forward, and then continue the dance, I will literally have her pretend she's doing that skill. So she'll dance, and then she'll stand in the proper position, do a straight jump as if she was going to jump backwards. I then have her walk backwards. I have her look down, see the first foot, see the second foot, which is exactly the technique I use when she's tumbling backwards. Then she'll do another straight jump as if she was about to take off for the layout. Then she'll walk backwards. She'll do a handstand and a landing drill. So from handstand, she'll see the first foot land, she'll see the second foot land, and then she'll stick it and then continue the dance routine. So that way I'm getting a win-win. It's less pounding on her body, so she's getting a bit of a rest, but I'm getting really valuable technical competency out of her because she's going through it mentally. Active mental routines on a line or on the beam, I really want the body connected with what their mind is doing. I don't have the girls very often sit, especially with their eyes closed, and go through the routine. For me, the visual component of beam is 100% essential, and it has a real impact on their stability. So I will generally do it with eyes open on a line or on a beam, and I add that component. We do have a few girls that are working with a sports psychologist, and you might see them just go off to the side, and it's something that they do for vault and bars and tumbling and vaulting. And so we incorporate that into their beam program because it works for them on the other pieces. But I'm really cautious of just having everyone, okay, everybody sit on the beam, everybody close your eyes, everybody go through your beam routine. It's not something that I do. I don't know if you've ever heard of this. It's a very popular thing in Britain to do. It's called a circuit. So what they do is they take the beam routine and they literally just take all the dance out. So they'll walk, 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 do an aerial, turn around, walk, 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 do a switch split, walk, walk, do a spin, walk, walk, walk. For me, it gives me no value. It doesn't increase her level of competency, and I've honestly never understood the purpose of it. So you're not getting the natural competitive flow that goes from the dance into the elements, and it's just an artificial exercise that, for me, doesn't relate to a competitive beam routine. So it's just not something I do, but it's very popular in certain countries to do. One thing I really do is a cold routine. So this means after the girl is warmed up on the line, she literally doesn't touch the beam at all. It's hand up and you do a full beam routine. The only thing I allow her to warm up is if she has a round off double back dismount, because it's dangerous. If you miss a foot, there's nowhere to land except on your head. So we're very, very cautious of that. And we want to make sure that she's competent. So we start it early in the season, long before we get to routine. Okay, today, after you warm up your flick layout on the line, there's no warm up on the beam. Normally she'd go flick timer, flick jump. Okay, now I feel good. Now I do flick. So in that way, she's gaining competence before she has the pressure of putting it in the routine. Once she has achieved that ability to be able to do every element cold without touching the beam first, then we start routines that way. The first routine of every day for every level that I coach, whether it's little ones that are just doing cartwheels or older ones that have aerial layout, The first routine of the day is a cold routine. And if she doesn't have that capability, then I have overestimated her ability on beam. Maybe she can do it physically, but it doesn't mean that she's ready mentally to be able to handle the skill under that kind of pressure. And when you're in a competition format, it gives amazing confidence. If you haven't had the greatest 30-second touch, you still know you can do the routine cold. And it's a big bonus. Some of the games I play, and I do it with every age group, is 3 for 3. So something that's a big pounding skill, punch front salto. They have to do 3 in a row. If they wobble at all or if they fall, they're at 0, and they keep going until they stick 3 in a row. But we make it a little bit more fun. So when they're on the 3rd one, okay, everybody stop and watch. Susie's on her 3rd one. If she sticks, she moves on. If she wobbles, she starts again. And so you can kind of play with the athletes and make training a little bit more fun. But the pressure is incredible, especially when you're doing 5 for 5. And they absolutely do not want to start again. The worst thing for them is to have to start again. Now, how long do you keep that game going? If she's fallen, I'll say, come on down, let's do the drill. Do you understand? Let's do it on the line, put it on the beam. Brilliant. Okay, let's start again. It's important that none of these things are punishment. They're for their benefit to make them better. So our attitude as coaches when we present these concepts, it can't feel like punishment. It has to feel like they're gaining something. Team hit is really difficult. It's very popular at NCAA. And when I had my own group of gymnasts who I knew extremely well in my club in Canada, we would do this. So every kid has to hit her beam routine. If one kid doesn't hit, the whole team has to go again. Be really careful of this one because the girls can really start to pick on each other if it's one kid that keeps missing. So it has tremendous impact with regard to I need to do it and I need to do it now. So it feels like competition, but you have to know your athletes extremely well. If any of these games start to feel like punishment, you've lost the positive impact that I'm using them for. 1 or 5 on a light day, I'd say, okay, it's 1 beam routine today. If you nail it, that's brilliant. We move on and we work new stuff or choreography or something else. If you don't hit it, then you've got 5 to do. And I tell them right away, just understand it's not a punishment. It just means you need more work. If you can't hit the first one, it just means that I haven't done my job and we need to work together a little bit more to get you to get to that level of competence. When the athletes are doing routines, they've got to do 5 or 7. When they fall, I will 90% of the time have them immediately repeat it. So she does the aerial, she falls, I'll say again. And she jumps up, she does it again, and then she finishes the routine. The reason I do this, and again, you have to be sure she understands how to do the skill technically. The reason I do that is because I want her to understand she actually can do it and she can do it really, really well. But at that moment, she didn't concentrate. So did you get up off your leg? Did you kick your back leg? Did you see the landing? Did you stop the energy? What part of that didn't you do? Do it, it's going to work. And then when she does it, it's like, there you go, bingo, you're good at this. So it's a matter of building their confidence. It's never as punishment. Regularly train more advanced elements. So again, you shouldn't be, or I don't anymore, did as a young coach, compete 100% of what you can do. So I'm always training something more advanced. It might just be on the line. It might be on a low beam. It might be on a high beam. But if she's doing flick layout, we are training flick layout. We're already moving on to do aerial layout. I want something more advanced because I'm always planning for the future, but it has this wonderful psychological impact on the routine of, this routine is not so difficult. I do harder stuff than this, but it's also getting you ready for the future. So it's always had a really good effect. Again, compete less than 100% difficulty. If she's at her absolute maximum of everything that she can do, that is tremendous pressure. And the chances of 100% technical skill and 100% technical excellence and accuracy, that's rare. That's really, really rare. And then if she's wobbling, if she's struggling, she's not feeling competent. So I need to be wise. I need to take something out, get her to own the routine, and then boost it back up. We used to do a drill with the kids where they have no coach. We stand back and they've got to prepare themselves. We used to also prepare them for any unique coach that they may run into, because you don't always travel with the athlete and you don't always know what the coach is going to say to them. So we would get some students to prepare the girl for beam, and right before she goes on, the student would be told, say silly things that a coach would never say. So the student would say, all right, now it's your turn. Now don't fall. Whatever you do, don't fall. Now don't think about falling, but don't fall. And then we'd be across the gym, hand up, and the athlete would have to perform. So in that sense, we're getting her, now if there's valuable information, they know enough to take it. And if it's not helpful, they know enough to stay within their own head, and they know to rely on their technical competence that they've been working all along. You want an independent athlete. You don't want an athlete that cannot perform without you. All right. So, of course, the 30 seconds is really very important, critical. We do this element, turn, take 2 steps, do the jump, whatever it is. And we train it. So that way, when you get to the competition, it's not a mad, chaotic rush. And you have to know in your head as a coach, okay, if she misses this element in the 30-second touch, are you going to have her repeat it? Are you going to have her move on? You have to have a scenario and a plan for everything. One thing that I've done over the years is in the 30-second touch, whatever the element is, she has to do the complete element. So if it's an aerial layout, she's got to do the whole thing. If it's a flick layout, she has to go flick layout, not just flick timer. Because in the 30-second touch, especially at bigger competitions, usually we warm up in a warm-up hall and then we come into a competition venue. They never really feel that environment on that day. So the 30-second touch is the only time I can get them to feel the competitive environment, and I want them to do the whole skill. Because if there's a problem, then I can do something on the line before they compete and we can fix it, and then she's ready for the competition. So I tend to do the entire element. Now, you can't do every element, obviously. So you pick and choose which ones need to be touched on, but whatever they are, I generally do the entire element. Number of routines versus stuck routines. I get asked this question a lot. How many routines do you do in a day? In my days in my Canadian club, generally 7. There was no rhyme, no reason to that. I kind of like 7. 10 sounded like too many, and 5 didn't seem like enough. As I work freelance, especially in Germany, Beam was not their strength, and getting to 5 routines is a lot. If I ask Paulina to do 5 routines, it's not possible. Now she's getting beyond 3. We're getting to 4. But she has such a fear and can control her mind only for a set period of time. And we're working within her level of competence. Once I get beyond that, it's too much. So that's where I have to make wise choices as a coach. Well, it's 7 because I said it's 7 and I like 7 and everyone else is doing 7. And she wouldn't have been on the team. So you have to pick your battles, and you have to work it through with the athletes. Again, the older they are, the more it's a partnership, and we work together on that. Grab every opportunity to perform under pressure that you can. So if it's an extravaganza, gym fest, whatever, and they all want to do their floor routine or zing around on the bars, I will have kids do beam, because you cannot buy enough opportunities to compete on beam. So that's very important for me. Final words that I say to an athlete before beam: I plan it, I organize it, I've got it in my head. Because it doesn't take much to throw an athlete off, especially one that you've been working with for a long time. So plan the final words, and sometimes it's an experiment, and I know, that didn't go really well, and then you work it out with the athlete. When they're a little older, I'll ask her, so how did it go, and were you comfortable with what we did before in the warm-up, with what I said, and how did you feel competing? And if you're brave enough to ask the question, if your mind is open to really listening, sometimes it's tough to hear what they're going to say, but that's how we developed as coaches, especially if you're working with older athletes. And I avoid the instinct to overprotect, especially when we're traveling. We've been to competitions and there's other personal coaches there, and we've got a little afternoon of sightseeing plan. And they go, no, my athlete can't go sightseeing. She'll be tired. She's got to stay in her room. And then the other kids, they go off, they do their little sightseeing thing, and then the competition is the next day. And what I found with that unless of course she's injured or there's a physical problem, but if she's a normal healthy kid that's about to compete the next day, with that kind of overprotection, what we're doing is we're affecting her level of competence. Oh, what's wrong with me? The other kids can go and they're not tired and they still compete. And ironically, the most obvious case happened fairly recently. And that was the only athlete that didn't compete well, and all the others competed quite well. So remember, we're trying to get the girls to be really confident in their own ability, and everything we do with them has a real impact. It's not just technical. The last thing I do with the girls that I want to show you is routine sheets. So this is Sarah Foss preparing for the World Championships. So what I have down the one side is everything that's in the routine, and I type that up on the computer for them. I purposely put the value in the bonus because I want to educate them and I want them to see every day. If you do it every day, this is your bonus and this is why it's in your routine and this is why it's important. I show them what their D score is. In this particular case for Zara, it was 5.8. Under that, I purposely write the new skills. I want them to see, yeah, that's the routine. It's 5.8, but we're planning ahead and it's kind of interface every single day. We never forget that we have more work to do. We never forget there are harder, more intricate, more difficult things to be mastered on beam. So this routine is pretty manageable. So that's bringing that whole component in. To encourage her with a 5.8, oh, look down below. You add those two things, boom, you're up to 6.3, which is pretty cool. So across the top, this particular sheet has 5 routines because that was pretty much the max for the German girls. And what we would do is routine 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. On the left side of each routine is a fall, then it progresses to a major mistake, that's like a big wobble. A minor mistake, maybe there's a tiny wobble, or you did it really well, but it wasn't connected. Or if you hit it perfectly, you got the connection, it was perfect, you didn't wobble, you stuck it, brilliant. So that's the routine sheet. I don't like paper and pencil drills in the gym because I want the athletes training. We never had enough time. In our gym, we trained 24 hours a week. It was never enough, but it was all we were allowed. So we learned to be really, really efficient in our gym. There's no sitting around. There's no, now I'll write in my journal. That's something you do at home. So this literally takes 30 seconds. She gets off the beam, she grabs her pape, goes tick, 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 tick. Once you've taught her how to do it, it takes 30 seconds. She's back on the beam or onto the line to do some repairs. So the way it looks like is this. When they fall, they have to color it in with a big black blob. There's 2 reasons for that. I've got all their papers in the book and I can just flip through it, boom, 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 boom. I easily see where we're struggling and it stands out like a sore thumb. That's why the girls don't like it. They don't want a black blob on their page. Most of the girls are perfectionists and they hate, so that they'll put, oh, X, I felt. No, you color that in completely because I want you to see that there's something that you can do better than that. So that black blob has an impact on them. Obviously, we want most of the check marks down the right-hand column where I did it, tick, tick, tick. You can develop any strategy you want. Where you see there's a round circle, a dot, this is a series. She can do both elements well, but sometimes she holds back a little bit and it's not connected. So it's only a minor mistake, but it affects her start value, and I want her to know that. So also, when I'm flipping through the book, you see all these massive check marks. I can zero in on the dot really quickly. I can zero in on the big black blob really quickly. And then if I'm timing, I'll yell out the time and she'll write it down as well. I leave room for comments. I've taken out the comments for Zara on a personal confidentiality basis, but she'll write comments. Felt great. Oh, I feel dead today. That one scared me. I stuck it better than I've ever stuck it. Whatever she wants to express, not a novel, just a quick little something. It might be about the routine. It might be at the end of all 5 routines. She writes a general comment. I'll take it home. I'll write my perception of what she's done, and then we'll quickly go over it the next day. So routine sheets have been really, really helpful. So we talk about basically those are the things I do. Again, not to punish, not to make the kids feel bad, but it's about making the athletes comfortable with being uncomfortable, and it has to be done in a positive way. 100 years ago, when it was the thing to do to be a mean, authoritative, aggressive coach, do it because I said so. Clearly that doesn't work, and it's not getting you what you want. Ours is a performance sport. So to perform, the gymnast, they've got to feel good about themselves. And that's my job, to get her to feel good about herself and to feel competent doing whatever she's doing. So just as a quick little example, this is one of the best stories I've ever heard about getting your athlete comfortable with being uncomfortable. And it was Bob Bowman. He was the coach to Michael Phelps. And in the lead up to the 2008 Olympic Games, he was trying to get him to what if scenario, be ready for anything. And he took Michael's goggles and stepped on them and put a little crack in them. And then time for the race, the goggles on, dive in the water, swim, and the goggles filled up with water. Now, it wasn't a really important race, but it was in the Olympic preparation process. And so Phelps had to struggle and persevere. When we talk about grit, passionate, positive perseverance, afterwards, they talked about it, and the coach was like, well, good for you. You handled that really well. So now, if that ever happens, you're just fine. And then they went on and did other competitions, swim meets, and everything was just fine. Well, lo and behold, at the 2008 Olympic Games, the coach did not step on the goggles, but somehow water started to fill up in his goggles. And there was this moment of clarity where Phelps sort of did that. I've been here before and I can handle this. And he went on to break a world record through adversity, but in something that he'd been prepared to handle, which I thought was a really interesting story. So the last thing I just want to deal with in our last 2 minutes is dealing with data. Our sport, the D score, the E score, the final score, all of that is important. But I want to give you the confidence that the most important factor is your plan with your gymnast that incorporates the D, the E, and the final score. So I'm just going to use Zara as an example. At the World Championships, our goal was definitely to make the beam finals. She had learned a lot over the last 2 years. I felt she had the capability to make a world beam final. And we had goals throughout the routine. In the qualification. So out of 207 gymnasts, she ended up ranking 7th. Her D score was 5.7. I must tell you, when you looked at that routine sheet, that was the week before we left. Can I go back to it really quickly? That was the week before we left for the World Championship. For me, the first routine of the day is the most important routine of the day. It's the cold routine, and that's what it'll feel like in a beam final. Although we warm up that day, and you can warm up in the warm-up gym, by the time you march in and compete in a beam final, it feels like the last time you were on a beam was 3 days ago. So there's no relationship to what you did in the warm-up gym to what you do in the competition gym. It's too far away, it's a different environment, and there's no 30-second touch in a world beam final. So that fall, that final week before the World Championships, I took the spin double out. And so her routine went from 5.8 down to 5.7. So in the qualification, she achieved the 5.7. I thought the routine was absolutely brilliant. And I'm a bit tough on what they do, my own opinion of what they're doing. And I thought it was brilliant. And the score comes up 13.6. It was like, what? So really tough judging, to the point that Francine Buffard from Gymnics in Montreal, she was there watching, and she came over and she said, man, if that's a 13.6, I don't know what a 13.8, a 14 is. It was really, really good. So the E score was only 7.9. So we were pretty surprised by that. But there she is in great company. She ends up still ranked 7th and still made the beam final. So we were really pleased by that. And so all hats off to the judges, who over 12 rotations, as 12 subdivisions, really had a handle on the scores all the way through. So some days the judging is going to be tougher, and it was much tougher during qualification, but they held the standard all the way through the day, which was really, really impressive, over 12 subdivisions. I don't know how they last that long, the judges. So in the individual all-round final, that was another opportunity for us to have Zara do the beam routine. And again, she ranked 7th. A little less stability. She didn't connect the leap series. She's down to a 5.6. Better on her E score, better on her final score. It was mostly good, but it was a little bit cautious. So across the top of the page, those are my comments. Mostly good, a bit cautious, but all in all, a pretty good job. She ended up being ranked 10th in the world, which is the highest all-round score for her. And again, she was still showing that she can do beam, which is great for her to get practice before the beam final a couple of days later. So here we are in Stuttgart, Germany, and she is German, and she's in the beam final, and all eyes are upon her, and there's nothing like being the hometown girl. So although I think we did a really good job, Sarah prepared well for the World Championships. We didn't anticipate what it would feel like to be in the beam final as the hometown girl with all eyes upon you. So it was definitely the weakest routine she's done. She stayed on, which was really, really good. And later I told her it would have been way easier to jump off in a couple of places. But the thing we had practiced the most since day one that I started with her, that attitude to fight, that's what stayed with her throughout. She fought to stay on, which was really impressive. But what we were missing was that confidence in the itty bitty, tinsy technical component that will make the series connect, that will get her to move with fluidity. She seized up a little bit, that's for sure. So it's probably the weakest routine she'd done in a very long time, whether in competition or at home. And I wanted her to know that it was okay, that she had actually achieved something that she was aiming for, which was to make the beam final. She ended up in 7th. Both Anna Padarariu and Zara had a tough day at the office in the beam final. Both gymnasts are capable of much, much more, especially Anna, of course, the reigning world silver medalist on balance beams. So you take everything that's happened, and when she was on I was the announcer at the competition, and her coach Shauna, her personal coach, and Sarah sort of look up, and I just touched my heart and I blew her a kiss, and it was like, well done, because I want her to know she's achieved something, she's accomplished something. We're gonna take everything that she's done, and we're going to maintain that all important self-worth, because from that I can go places. It's easier to go, hey, what are you doing? That's the worst routine you've done in months. But she's already, I knew it wasn't my best, but that's not going to get me anywhere. That's not going to get her anywhere. Has that sense of self, that level of competence, and she knows she can actually do better than that. It's not like being 140th and you did your very best. She knows she's capable of more, and that's what her and her personal coach and Ula, the head national coach, that's what we're working with her on at the moment, to understand that she's done this, and that's an amazing, amazing accomplishment, and you're capable of so much more, and it's believable because of our reaction to her, and she believes it. So that's what comes down to the self-worth. So a little bit over time, sorry about that, but it's very important to me when I'm dealing with the athletes that I dream big, I work hard, and I'm passionate about every single thing I do with them, because I want that out of them. And that's the confidence and the level of competence I want them to have. So it's that belief And it's very important for me to lead by example. So thank you. Leanne, I don't know if you want to come back on now because I have no idea what to do here to take questions.
No problem, no problem. So I did have one message that came through from Falcon Gymnastics asking about strategy for 2 or 3 day competitions. Example, the number of routines.
Good question. Because it's very difficult to mimic that in your home gym. So if you have a qualification day, and then there's a team final day or an individual all-around day, and then a beam final day, we will actually go through that. And it's important that one leads to the next. So if you have a day off in between, you make it as only a training day that day. If it's a back-to-back competition, you have to compete this day and you have to compete this day. And so rather than just do routines that day, the first routine of the day will be the competition. So hand up, it's a cold routine. This is the qualification competition, and they'll compete. After they finish, go get a drink, relax, maybe even go on to your next piece, compete everything. And then later that training, or in your second training session that day, then we'll do the training. Then we'll do our 5 beam routines or 7 beam routines, whatever it is. As I get closer to competition, I do decrease my numbers. Now with Germans, it's tricky decreasing the numbers because they're relatively low already. So that's why that cold routine is so critical. It's absolutely crucial, because if they're showing you they have that level of competence, you feel better, they feel better about it. But if you're doing 7 to 10 routines normally, then you're going down to 7 to 5, from 5 to 3, and you're winding it down. Just doing routines for the sake of doing routines to say I've done 5 doesn't give me value, doesn't give her value. It has to be with consequence. It has to be looking at their level of competence, not just, okay, you did 5, move on. How did you do 5? What were they like? What was the quality? So, and then we might, if we've watered it down or weaned it down to just 3 in the week before the competition, maybe what we'll do is we'll do a technical training. So we'll do routine training. Okay, get your 3 done. The first one is cold. You've got 2 more to do after that. If there's an issue, then what I'll do is I'll do technical training, and I'll take that athlete and that one skill separately, and we'll drill it on the line. We'll put it on the low beam. We'll put it back on the high beam, whatever it is. So you've got your routine training, but then we have a technical session where we're just working the 1 or 2 things that you just need a little bit more practice on to feel confident. But it's important to mimic the competition as much as possible. And that's hard for kids to compete back to back, especially if it's all for apparatus. But that's what we would do in a gym. We would compete all 4, and then we'll have a technical session later in that training session, or in a second training session if you're fortunate enough to have 2. I don't know if that answers it. And I see no faces. I don't know if
okay. Perfect. So just a couple of thank yous that came through from John. This has been a wealth of practical ideas and knowledge, so thank you for that. Kana, inspiring as usual. Congratulations to you and your athletes, or the athletes who have been fortunate enough to benefit from your expertise. And then we had another question that just came through. How do you deal with athletes who have had a very bad routine in an important competition? How regain motivation and not let it affect the athlete in the future?
Great question. And that's the essence of coaching. So immediately I will go to that athlete. And I know some coaches like to give them space and let them think about it. But my experience through all my years, it's not what I used to do when I was a very young coach, but my experience is the negative self-talk is the worst possible thing. So I will intervene immediately and go to them and have the honest, I don't know, or I was nervous, or nervous. Okay, but we've worked a lot on nervousness, but it's a big warning flag to me that I need to rework it in the gym, and I need to create those competition scenarios in the gym a little bit more often. But it's a matter of talking, letting her express frustration, not say, oh, it's okay, don't worry, you're better than that, it'll be okay. It's the last thing they want to hear. So the first thing I do is listen, and I acknowledge her frustration, her anger, but I'll immediately stop the conversation if it becomes personal. If she says something like, oh, I'm just so stupid. I can't believe I did that. Okay, stop. You're definitely not stupid. So let's rework that. So I'll intervene immediately, listen a lot, validate her feelings, and then what I want to do is help her work through it. And sometimes right there and then, I'll take her over to the line and go, all you did was this. Now, do this, boom, get one done on the line if it's a safe enough area to do it. Or I might just do the drill or do it mentally and go, boom, there you go. Okay. So now you know you can do it. And now we've just got to rework the routine and make sure that we get it done. So listen, validate, find a way to correct it right there and then, and show hope for the future. Not that you've given up on her, not that you've written her off, or now you're not going to qualify. Blah, blah, blah. Hey, let's see how it goes. You know, the famous park it and now let's go on. But it's hard to park it if it hasn't been listened to or validated or fixed. So in a very quick little manner, I will try to fix it as much as possible. And boom, there you go. There it is. Okay, great. Now let's get ready for floor. So try to move on to the next piece and get her focused on something else. But it's really hard to move on if you haven't taken those few moments to listen, validate, and fix.
Okay, we have 2 more questions and then we'll wrap up here. So the first one, would you have them do a cold routine in a new space? Example, first time in a new gym or in a new city, first walk, or complex routine?
Great question. Should have thought of that myself. No, the answer is 100% no. So the cold routine is only when they're used to the gym. So they need to get in. I usually start with a dance routine. I do not do complex during the competitive season. I'll do dancing, and I need them to be able to get on a beam and be able to do everything out without a warm-up of beam complex. A lot of athletes are beam complex world champions, but it doesn't relate to what they're doing in their beam routine. Most beam complex is slow and balanced work, and I want fast and move and aggressive and active. So it just doesn't give me what I want to get out of the girls. So that's one reason I don't do beam complex. But if I go to a new gym, the first touch of a beam will be a dance routine. And then depending on the level of girl, we might do some timers, and then they'll do the skills. And then when they come back to that gym later that day or the next day, the first routine is cold. If the athlete is ever showing distress, of course you don't say, well, hey, our goal is cold routine, you got to do it. We've got to be able to adapt to that one individual that might be showing some sort of hesitation. But in a new environment, the first thing I'll do is have them do a dance routine, and then we'll start to add all of their jumps, and then we'll do their acro timers if they require, then full acro, then dismount, and then we'll put the whole thing together. So that's an excellent question. By day 2, they should be able to do a cold routine properly.
Okay, and final question. How do you deal with parental influence on your athletes?
Yeah, ooh, that's a really good one. And I went through the whole gambit. In my club, I was the head coach and the director of the program, although I coach beam and floor. When dealing with parents, I've gone through doing everything for them and then changing to doing nothing, and you should trust us and we won't communicate, which I'll save you a lot of trouble right now. Don't do that. Communication is the absolute key. And I want them to know that they serve a very important role. This athlete needs a parent or parents. She needs you, but she needs me too. I don't do what you do, and you definitely don't do what I do. So we want to set it up in fairly regular meetings. We would interview our athletes in a private meeting 3 to 4 times a year. Or if you're just having that one problem parent, at least get that one parent in. But we set up the meeting to make sure that the lines of communication are open. I want them to understand why we've decided. For example, is a skill in or is it out? I decided to take out the spin double. The athlete had very definite goals of qualifying for a world championship beam final. And we were doing everything that we could possibly think of to help her achieve that goal. So once you explain it, it's generally understood. when the athletes are younger, you might get the pushy parent that just wants to push, push, push all the time. And the one thing I'll always say to the athlete is the health and safety of your gymnast and her positive sense of self-esteem is the number one priority for me. So is it for you? And then they'll kind of, oh, yeah, of course it is. Well, great. I'm glad that we're on the same page because this is why. The important thing as a coach to be able to deal with parents like that is to be incredibly organized, to have some stats and some figures and to show the beam book, see that fall. I've got too many falls on this element to feel good about having her do that in the competition. And you've got to have good communication with the athlete as well. If it's just old style coaching, well, because I said so, it's my choice, I made the decision, you'll get a lot of fight over that. So it was important for me as a younger coach to learn that the parents are incredibly invested financially. It's an expensive sport, but time-wise, our sport is crazy. The kid has no normal life compared to other athletes that are on the soccer team or the volleyball team or whatever team. They don't spend nearly the number of hours that our gymnasts do in the gym. And that's a whole family commitment. And so we have to really let the parent vent, and then we counter with education as to why the decision was made. And I think when we always show that we have the best interests of the gymnast at heart, and we put that first, I think most reasonable parents will accept that.
Excellent, excellent. I think that was the last question that came through. So thank you so much, Carol Angela, for leading our session today. You're a phenomenal presenter. We are so happy to have you. So thank you for sharing your wealth of knowledge for us.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you to all the attendees that participated today as well. If you do have any last minute questions, feel free to send them over to me, coaching@gymbc.org, and I'd be happy to connect you with Carol Angela after the fact if needs be. Also, in the notification that I sent you guys earlier today, there is a post-webinar survey. So if you wanted to take a couple of minutes to fill that out, it's just providing feedback about the session today or possible topics for upcoming sessions, so we can continue these webinars for you guys moving forward. So we appreciate you taking the time to do that. So thank you again, everybody, for participating and being here today, and we'll connect with you guys all again soon. Thank you.
Thanks so much.